Microsoft reported earnings, beat across the board, huge growth in the cloud, but not a great reaction from investors. Shares down this morning. What's your reaction to their reaction?
Well, we've seen a 55% increase or so in our stock price over the last 12 months. So, yeah, it's not surprising that we're seeing a bit of a step back. The reality is that it was a very strong quarter. It exceeded expectations. It had revenue growth of 19%, operating income growth of 31%. What I think in so many ways we were pleased to see was really strength across the board. Azure continuing to be a leader with 50% growth. Strong PC growth. That was great to see. I think that is here to stay as people have sort of rediscovered how valuable a laptop and a PC are. Enormous growth in gaming, really led by our new Xbox consoles. So it really, when we look across the board, every part of our business is doing well right now.
Microsoft's market cap has been flirting with $2 trillion, which I know Satya does not love talking about, but you have to admit it is an accomplishment. What do you think?
Well, look, stocks prices are one way to measure what you do, and of course the world is going to look at it. But it's a yardstick or a measurement today, and it'll change tomorrow. I think the real question for us every day, especially when it comes to our strategic planning, is what does the world need from us in the year 2030? What will the world need from technology in the year 2030? How do we make the long-term investments that will continue to accrue to what we can achieve in that instance, obviously, 9 years from now? So we're looking way beyond this stock price and today's price.
Meantime, President Biden has laid out a big, bold infrastructure plan, and you've pointed out that tech is constantly changing what the future will look like and require. Is Biden's plan futuristic enough?
Well, we as a company are very supportive of the president's infrastructure plan. It really does two things. First, it in effect remodels and updates the infrastructure of the 20th century, a remodel that's badly overdue, whether it's our roads and bridges, our electrical grid, or even our schools, especially in both urban and rural areas. But it also invests in the infrastructure of the 21st century as well. As we've been saying for years, broadband's the electricity of the 21st century. Just as the government supported the expansion of the electrical grid in the 1930s, it needs to ensure that broadband reaches every American in home and business in this decade. So it's right that the administration prioritize broadband. It's essential that it focus as it does on digital skills. We've got to bring broadband and skilling together to reach every part of the country.
So I have to ask you then about Biden's corporate tax plan, which would raise Microsoft's taxes. I spoke to Alphabet CFO Ruth Porat, who said Google is supportive, but tax policy is only part of the answer. The government needs to look at raising revenue in a coordinated way. What do you think? Should Microsoft be paying more in taxes?
Well, what we've said is we need to have a conversation about corporate taxes. And I think we need to do it in a way that is sensitive to the needs of different parts of the economy. Clearly, some parts of the economy, like the tech sector, have more capacity. We're doing better. We would certainly like to see our competitors, paying their fair share of taxes. There are some in the industry that, frankly, pay a very, very low rate. But we also need to be especially sensitive, I think, to the international competitiveness of those parts of the American economy that operate on lower margins than tech. So it's a real conversation that needs to be had. The nuances are really critical.
Any competitors you'd call out that you think aren't paying enough?
No, it sounds like you're doing a good job of talking to people already.
Now, moving to antitrust, your rivals are getting most of the scrutiny: Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook. Why do you think you're avoiding the hot seat? And what do you have to say to the skeptics who think regulators should be looking at Microsoft, because you do have some very strong market positions?
Well, I don't know that we are in quite the same market position as some of our competitors. We certainly get questions from time to time, and we always focus on answering them and addressing them. I do think as all of this evolves, we're going to see antitrust regulators focus their energy in certain areas. Certainly from our perspective, we've been very public about, for example, what we see as the impact of Google on something like local journalism. It's interesting to just look at what has happened to what was supposed to be an open web. That was the promise of the internet, that it would be open to everyone. And while it is at one level, the reality is that Google has fundamentally sucked most of the oxygen out of the opportunities for people who create content to actually earn a living through advertising. In 2005, news organizations in the United States earned $45 billion, almost $50 billion, from advertising. That has fallen to 14. It has created this huge hole in opportunity for people to earn a living by writing and creating news. Where has all the money gone? Well, it's very clear where it has gone. In Alphabet's earnings yesterday, they showed that in a single quarter, they had almost $45 billion in digital advertising. And so what Google has fundamentally done is redesign and re-engineer the web so that if you want to make money from content based on advertising, you have to do it through their exchange by using their tools and paying money to and through Google. The open web is now open in theory only, because if people can't make a living by generating content, then they just are forced to go do something else. And when you see the impact of that, when you see the impact on local news, what you're seeing increasingly is a threat to democracy itself. And so I think that's where we're going to see regulators move. And I think where we're focused on is seeing what we can do to sort of restore some of these opportunities for others across the web.
So you are also announcing this on another note, 5-year initiative to close the disability divide, including new technology, new investments, new skills and partnerships. There are so many disabled people who frankly aren't in the workforce when they could be. Why is this so important to Microsoft?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. This is just an enormously important issue, and I think we all have an opportunity to learn more about it. When you look at the world today, and you just look at the demographics, you see two things. First, more than 1 billion people have some type of disability, temporary or permanent, and the number is growing, both because of the aging population and, unfortunately, because of the legacy that COVID will leave in its wake. And second, we see an enormous disability divide. Only 33% of people in the United States with a disability have a job today. That compares with 76% of their peers. People with disabilities, in short, are less likely to have a job and are more likely to live in poverty. And this is something that we in the tech sector can do more to address. And that's why at Microsoft, we're launching a new 5-year initiative today that really is focused on 3 things. One, making digital technology a more effective tool for people with disabilities and for companies that rightly should want to hire more people with disabilities. 2, we really want to use technology to open up the workforce, to help people with disabilities master the learning and connect with the skills and jobs so that they can be the valuable part of the workforce they should. And 3rd, make workplaces themselves more inclusive, more accommodating and welcoming. As we found at Microsoft, people with disabilities have enormous talent. We just have to think a little bit differently to make it easier for these people to join us and work successfully. And when we do, we're a better business because of it. So we're very committed to this as an important initiative going forward.